Welcome back to another showcase of 5 tips by a master class. We do this once a week as I introduce you guys to what I think is an incredible group of people that I've been blessed to be friends with, from innovators, from disruptors, to entrepreneurs, to storytellers, to just awesome people that are making an impact. And so today I have my good friend Kundan with me. What's up, Kundan? Thank you for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a more formal intro because I think you deserve it, and then I'll do the what's up, okay?
For sure.
So for those of you that don't know, Kundan is the founder and CEO of the App Lab, and the App Lab is a super innovative, uber cool company that he started how long ago now?
10 years.
10 years, man. We're working on a decade. They've got offices in Toronto, New York, Melbourne, Hong Kong, 2 in India. So they're a global shop, which says a lot because a lot of Canadian companies tend to just focus on Canada. And so when we create a global map, and I didn't even know you're all the way there. So this is awesome. We want to talk more about that. But the App Lab also got a couple of spin-offs. So one is the Innovation Lab, which is the R&D,
yep.
Right? And then the Startup Lab, where you've invested and accelerated with 39 investments.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Been fun.
If that is not busy enough, Kundan also is a program advisory board member at Centennial College and the advisory board member at desiFEST. And you're married and you've got a kid and you've got a great social life, which I follow. So first of all, forget the tips. How do you not sleep? But welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. First of all, I want to mention this, that when I started my business, you have been a constant inspiration for me.
Hey.
And to be interviewed by this guy right now is a massive, massive honor.
Hey,
so big props to that.
I mean, cool. We all started somewhere.
Everything that you've done.
No, thank you, man. I appreciate you saying that. So the audience that we're talking to is young entrepreneurs, young millennials,
yep.
People that are sick of reading the book about these big brands and big personalities, where, yes, I want to learn from Mark Zuckerberg. I want to learn from all of the big superstars, the Dragon Dens and all this stuff.
Right.
But sometimes you need a dose of reality from people that are in your neighborhood, in your background, in your ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And that's why, when I read your bio, and I've known you so long that sometimes the granular detail escapes me, because I just know Kundan, the App Lab, founder, award winner, all this kind of stuff. But when you break it down, you're like, man, you're building a pretty big enterprise, all focused on tech. So let's talk a little bit about App Lab and the inspiration that got you there.
For sure.
How have you been in it for a decade now, and how you've pivoted to have 2 more, sub startups?
For sure. So yeah, been 10 years in the game, 500 apps later. Definitely has been a crazy journey, a great journey, obviously. Throughout the point, I knew 2 things. I love serving entrepreneurs. I love serving people who have great ideas.
Yeah.
So that's all, because I learn a lot from that. We grow from that a lot. And I love innovating, right? So those have been the 2 foundational pillars for everything that we do.
Yeah.
And hence that's sort of been organic in terms of how we've grown. We've pivoted immense number of times in these 10 years. Started as a totally different company name, doing digital marketing as a whole, and then just figuring out our niche one step at a time and doing that, right? So it's been, obviously, and you know that, as an entrepreneur, the journey is always ups and downs and so on and so forth. But it's always sticking to your core beliefs and making sure you're doing that. You're able to look at yourself at the end of the day in the mirror. When you're in the morning, you're super excited and you're picking yourself up and jumping in the bed. That's what you want to do.
And you do all that before even a cup of coffee kicks in.
Yeah, exactly.
Self-motivation, man.
Self-motivation.
I think what's a cool segue, because you brought this up, this definition of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because we started like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever it was. Has the definition changed, in your opinion? Meaning, is today's entrepreneur really an entrepreneur by the definition of entrepreneurs didn't have a lot back then? Right? Now we can do a lot more for very little.
For sure.
And the definition of the starving entrepreneur was what we grew up with. Like, you kicked out of your house, you can't feed yourself, you need to survive.
Totally.
So is the definition of entrepreneur in your mind changed? And then you, as a business owner after 10 years, do you still see yourself as an entrepreneur, or is there evolution that goes from entrepreneur to business owner? And is there a difference? I'm curious.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the definition, it has changed. It has changed. In some ways, it has gotten easier to be an entrepreneur today.
Right.
In some ways, it has gotten more difficult because there are so many people wanting to be entrepreneurs. A lot of times, I mean, especially in the tech world, earlier technology used to be a barrier, and if you cross that barrier, hey, great, you can be a success.
Yeah.
Technology is not so much of a barrier anymore. Most people can just plug in some APIs and start like pushing some stuff out, right? So in some ways, it has gotten difficult as well to really differentiate yourself and to really make sure you're onto something, right? But at the core, the definition is still the same, right? You are, as an entrepreneur, you are taking risks. If you're not taking risks, you're not an entrepreneur, right? So if you're going in on day one of your business with a load of cash, you're not taking a risk, right? So the definition is still the same. You're taking risks, you're building something, you're solving problems, you have that, your core, unique, out-of-box way of solving those problems. So it's still the same in that way. But I guess it's become difficult in some ways and easier in certain ways,
So part two. Are you an entrepreneur still, or are you now a businessman?
Still an entrepreneur, I would say. Still an entrepreneur. I'm always always get excited by new ideas, always get excited by new possibilities of how we can impact, and it's always a growth mindset, right? So I think, still an entrepreneur.
I don't know about your wife, but mine's always like, stop your brain. It's gonna explode. Surbi, what do you think? Comment below.
She'll be like, why do you stop your brain at home? Keep it running at home as well.
That's awesome, man. So much of our success is our wives. So shout out to our wives.
Totally.
So let's segue into the first tip. So, our audience is always looking for what are actionable things that I can take and learn and repurpose and use. So, our topic today is, if you want to be an entrepreneur, what are some tips from like the real hustle, the real, in the grunt, people like us, where we built it, we struggled it, we've been broke, we've been rich, all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about tips that you've learned. And give me the first one.
Yeah, for sure. So the first one, I mean, considering your audience, which is millennials, and when I'm talking at universities and so on, I get this question a lot, which is why I'll focus on this one. So is the reason, right, in a way? I mean, why are you doing it? A lot of times when I ask this question to millennials, to students and so on, the answer I get is either for the money, because that's one way of getting super rich, getting super successful, whatnot, the way they define their success. And second is because it's cool to be an entrepreneur. So both of those are wrong reasons to be an entrepreneur, and you know that as well, right? So I think the first reason, or the first way you know you're right to be an entrepreneur, is when you have a really strong, meaningful purpose. Where you feel you identify yourself with this particular purpose, and you really develop a burning passion towards it. If that and the main reason for that is because if you don't have that purpose and a burning passion for that purpose, the kind of downs you get when you're an entrepreneur, the money itself is not a strong enough driving force to say, you know what, I want to go through this, right? So that purpose is what will really drive you and say, hey, you know what, I need to get here. The reason I want to get here is not internal, is external focus. I want to make an impact. I want to make this world a better place, whatever that is. I want to solve this one particular niche for whatever, for these 10 people or 10 million people, whatever that is. That really helps you like measure yourself up on a daily basis, right? So I feel that burning passion for that purpose in your life, which are well defined, that makes it really easy, right? And that also helps you really vision out, create a vision for yourself, and once you create a vision, you can then easily create a path for yourself, create those goals and so on. So that I would say is the first step.
Interesting. My very first accountant wasn't a good accountant. But he told me something, and I was like 20, and we were going through our first cash flow issue, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, look, success in business and being an entrepreneur is less about knowing how to ride the highs, but how long can you stay in the shit, like in the bottom, where the only person that can believe there's something around the corner is you.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And you can't do that if you don't have the right reason to do it.
Exactly.
Right? Without getting too sentimental, why App Lab? Of all the things you do in life, what was your purpose?
Right. So my purpose, my calling has always been innovation, right? I've always loved having unique problems. I've always wanted to stand out, to be very honest. And to stand out is through my ideas, right? And so it always has been about out-of-box ideas, about finding a different way of thinking, different way of solving a problem, right? And with App Lab, I mean, we are at a great spot where we are solving tens and tens of problems on a daily basis,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm really fortunate to be in that position, whether we are talking with larger clients like the Unilevers and the Dells and the Samsungs of the world, or it's like startups which are just at idea stage. They just have an idea. What do I do, right?
Yeah.
Within each of those situations, you face those problems, and through your experience, which all comes together after some time, you are actually able to. I would say, our role at AppLab when it comes to working with clients is more as navigators. How can we navigate them through what their idea is, what their vision is, to come to the right solution, right? And through our perspective, we can help them do that. So that's what keeps us driving, keeps us
That's awesome,
actually
man.
feel that we're innovating on a daily basis.
And that gives you a 10-year run, 20-year run, because innovation never leaves you, right?
Totally.
Ideas can change. You know, people that don't know me well enough, I didn't start the business because I wanted to make websites 10 years ago. I was a very shy, super introvert kid. Like the version you guys see on desiFEST and all this stuff was a learned behavior. And so I was like, the only way I can learn how to be this other guy is to fully change the way I live and breathe and make money. And so you had to learn how to pitch and go to networking events and meet people and win ideas that turns into dollars. But that was like my purpose. And then whether we did websites or ads or whatever, that's all transitional. But I was really focused on how can I become a better version of me than who I was when I first started this venture. And so it never really mattered if we made a lot or less. It was a sign of effort. But purpose was still the same.
Exactly.
So tip number one, find or figure out your reason. Okay. Number two.
Number two, I would say is, and sort of comes from number one, right? When you're really passionate about a certain cause, about a certain purpose, you really embody yourself with the audience that's there. So number two tip, in essence, is figure out who are you helping, right? Who are you solving the problem for?
Like who's the audience?
Who's the audience, in essence, right? A lot of entrepreneurs that I meet, they feel that this is the problem they're solving, or they know what the solution is, right? They really don't know the core of the problem. If the problem really exists, how much of an impact that problem has in their daily lives, and that will help you figure out how much of an impact that solution will have on those lives, right? So really knowing your audience at a really deeper level, usually, and that's why a segue from number one is because when you're passionate for a particular purpose, usually it's something that you're good at, or a problem that you faced in your life, or a good friend of yours faced in your life, or you were in that industry, or you work for something like that, right? So you usually know that audience that well, or yourself is the audience. But regardless of 1 person, 2 people, 5 people, knowing your audience on an ongoing basis, talking to them, understanding at a deeper level, not just about the problem, but just understanding the person. What is the person? What is their attitude? What is their personality? What are their habits, likes, dislikes, all of that
and
stuff.
And why would they buy your solution?
Exactly. So you need to really live their lives in order to solve their problems, right? So the second one is figure out who your audience is, really understand and your audience in essence.
And if you guys haven't seen the previous episode, which is Sonia Gill from Take My Sorry, you should watch that because she also talks about knowing the right audience and building a solution. And Take My Sorry feats a very unique problem, but it's a global problem for South Asians. And so you got to go watch it. I'm not going to tell you now. And this notion of not only not finding out who your audience is, but to your point, will they buy your idea?
Exactly.
Just because I know the audience doesn't mean they'll buy my version of the story. Cool. That's a great tip, man. Number three.
So number three, I would say, do you know how to sell? Again, right? When someone says, hey, I'm really passionate about this cause, it could be because they're a techie and they figured out a problem or whatever. They were probably in different walks of life, whatever, right? Regardless, if you are an entrepreneur, you need to know how to sell. Whether you are selling it to an investor, to a customer, to your founders,
to your wife,
to people, to your wife.
Like, hey, I'm going to do this thing.
Exactly. So you need to really know how to sell, right? So which comes with ability to understand the other person, understand their motivations, and able to align sort of your thoughts and beliefs with them. It's obviously a part of influencing, the skill of influencing people in a positive way, obviously, while understanding what they stand for and so on. So yeah.
So the one thing I get whenever I say that comment, and I want you to look there and tell these guys the answer, because I think I know what you're going to say, is, oh, I'm not you, man. you're Mr. Sats.B on stage. You can talk to anybody. Well, I'm not you, man. I need like 3 drinks before I can warm up. But then you're drunk and you can't network. So how do you like not just practice selling, but just even practice talking to people and sharing your thoughts in a very smart, intelligent, thought-through way, right? Like, how did you learn? Were you always like this? Outgoing and
No, I was
rocking
just
a
like
bow
you.
tie and pocket square.
That I learned from you, by the way.
I've never
Bala bow
not
ties was
seen
my first
you
one.
in a dress shirt. I don't think I've ever seen you with like basketball shorts and runners.
No, not even on weekends actually. It's just kind of pathetic.
So tell me, how do you like?
So I was an introvert, just like you, right? So I was an introvert, and that was one of the aspects, right? I enjoyed this other side, and why can't I be on that side, kind of a thing, right? I want to be the cool kid, whatever, right? So I always enjoyed that. It's not like I was afraid of being outgoing.
Right.
It's just that it didn't come naturally to me, right?
Yeah.
So that was just a part where I just surrounded myself with people. I mean, and that's not just for this skill. For any skill, I mean, one thing I've learned is always hang out with people who are better than you, right? That's why I hang out with you.
That's a great tip. I think that's why I hang out with you. It's like this man bromance going on right now, which is awesome.
So that's what I did. I hung out with a lot of outgoing people.
Right.
And I was like, okay, how do they do this? How do they convince someone to do something? So, the real answer is I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? I went to study, went to Western University to be a software engineer.
Right.
Happened to get my first summer job as a sales guy, which I was great at, but I hated because it was door to door. I learned tons from it. And then from there, I just, I knew I was good at selling, so I just wanted a good gig. So I found a good gig at Rogers, whatever, and I made a ton of money through that. And I was like, okay, I'm good at selling, right? And in that job, the reason I was so good is because one of my buddies who was a really good salesman, I was like, how is he doing it? I want to be doing sales like him. So I just hung out with him. I saw his mannerisms, the way he talked to people, the way he convinced people, and that I just embodied that. I'm good at copying. So
I don't know who said it. I think it was a quote on Instagram, and I read a lot of these like quotesy stuff on Pinterest and stuff. But there was a quote I remember, and I'm paraphrasing, something to the effect of, "Show me your friends, and I'll tell you how successful you're going to be."
Yeah.
Which I think is really true. Right? Because the people that we surround ourselves with are a direct line to our success.
For sure.
And most people don't take that very seriously, right?
Because they feel that if they are better than me in this particular trait, why would they hang out with me, right? But the truth is, everyone is different. You have some traits which the other person doesn't. So usually everyone gets inspired by everyone, right?
So I like tip number 3, because the idea of practice your skill in selling is much deeper than just the sales process. It's about learning how to change who you are to some degree in a positive way, but also having the guts to know I need to surround myself with people that are better than me so I can learn. So I think tip 3 is like 3, 4, 5 kind of put together, which is kind of nice.
But one more point to that is, I know a lot of introvert entrepreneurs as well, but they do a great job at selling because they're really passionate about their purpose and about the idea that they're talking about, right? So when you're passionate, you'll see them, and a lot of that happens to me. I go to a networking event. If I'm talking about App Lab, I'm like, yeah. And it's end of the day. I've woken up at 4 a.m. And then after I've talked to someone, I'm like, I'm dead in some corner. I'm like, okay, whatever. I want to just get out of here, right? So, but I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are introverts. They don't really have those social conversations. When it comes to a company, their eyes light up and they are they just have that burning desire, right? So again, goes from point 1 onwards. So.
No, that's cool, man. I like that. Tip number 4.
Tip number 4. Know how to be a people person.
Okay.
I think a business is all about people at the end of the day, right? Your customers, your clients are your people. Your team is your people. Your investors are the people. So it's all about human relationships, right? At the end of the day. A lot of times, and again, usually when you're at the bottom of the curve as you're going through your entrepreneurial journey, everything becomes numbers, right? It's like, okay, profit, loss, sales, quota, etc.,
Excel
right?
spreadsheets.
Exactly. So it all becomes numbers, and the numbers like show up like in your nightmares, whatever, right? And you sort of forget that. I mean, at the other side of the table, it's a person.
It's a human being.
It's a human, right? So, I mean, you need to have those human connections at the end of the day. So when you look at everyone around you as human, as people, and how are you really adding value to each of their lives? Whether it's a client, you're adding value to them. Whether it's your own people, you're adding value to them, right? So really understanding people and knowing people, but more importantly, learning how to collaborate and really work with people in a way that it's always win-win, right? And the way I define win-win is not saying I want to win and you want to win, right? So let's look at each other's win. The way I like to define win-win is, if you're working together, let me take care of your win, and I believe in you that you'll take care of my win, right?
Give first.
Give first,
Yeah.
and just expect them
That's
to
a
give
great way
back,
to
right?
look at it. Yeah.
Because if you're inward, if you're looking at your win and you want them to win as well, you will always prioritize your wins over the other person.
That's
So
a good way to look at it.
unintentionally, you might the partnership won't work.
You know, it's a great way to look at it. I've never really first of all, I never really understood this win-win. I always felt like somebody will lose. Like that's just my philosophy.
Which happens, right? Because when you're looking for the other person, it's not necessarily the other person will look out for you.
Yeah, and it's probably because I grew up competitive basketball and then like getting into the DJ scene and starting my business. So I always looked at it like there's never really a win-win.
Right.
There's always a win-lose,
Right.
but you can define what loss means.
For sure.
It could be education. It could be
Of course.
life lessons. It could
sure.
be a way out because you didn't even know it wasn't that good.
For sure.
So if we redefine the word loss,
Right.
then it's win something.
For sure.
Versus win-win or win-loss. So I have a different, but I see what you're saying.
Totally.
And I like yours. It's a bit nicer than my harsh, like, win-lose. No.
The way I like that is because even when you lose, and you lose a lot of times, right? Majority of the times you lose in those situations. But when you win, you win big, right? In that approach. But the reason I like that is even when you lose, you still lose in an empathetic fashion, right? You still say that, you know what? That I can see why that person did that.
Yeah.
They screwed me over in this business, whatever, but I can see why they did. I mean, whatever, they wanted to get profits, etc., whatever that is, right? So it's a lot easier to sort of gulp that loss.
Well, it's funny. I made a change in how I spoke 5 years ago, and I said, I'm never going to use the word lose again, because I will never lose. I would either win,
right,
or I would learn.
Or learn, totally.
So we would go to these big pitches, and we get the call saying you guys didn't get the gig or whatever. I look at my team and go, okay, we learned something.
Right. Totally.
Because when you say you lose, it just deflates you.
Yep.
Any learning first goes out the door because you're in this not so good emotional state. But if you say, hey, I'm going to win all the time,
right,
or I'm going to learn so I can win again.
Totally.
That's it.
Totally.
I don't use the word lose because you can't lose.
Yep.
You're either learning or winning.
Totally.
So tip number 5.
So my tip number 5 is on that same note. And that I would say is accept failure. Do not be afraid of failure because failure is inevitable.
Yeah.
I mean, in that competitive spirit, I'm a very competitive person, obviously, you know me. What happens in that competitive spirit, you want to win. You want to win all the time. You want to win each time, right? And when you get into that habit, a failure, when it strikes you, and usually it strikes you really hard, you don't want to accept it. And the more you don't accept it, the worse it gets.
Exactly.
Because you're in denial, and it'll keep on hitting you harder. And actually, you keep going down further, right? If you had accepted when it hit you, it would have been a lot easier, actually.
You say it's good, check mark.
Exactly. So failure is inevitable. Don't be afraid of it. Don't keep an ego, first of all, but don't let your ego stop you from accepting that failure is going to happen. I mean, this is life. You're going to get wins, you're going to get failures. No one is going to only win, right? I mean, and we see that among all the superstars in the world. They would have probably right from the birth, they had everything and they went on to scale large heights. At some point, something hit them, right?
Absolutely.
So it's inevitable, right? So if you can actually feel that, you know what, failure is not going to bother me, failure is not going to derail me from path. I'm not afraid of failure because it's not going to have any impact on me. Then, as what you said, every loss is going to be a learning lesson, and you're only going to look at it as great that I got the failure right now. Then
I learned something. I move on.
The earlier you fail, and that I mean, in the startup philosophy and lean startup whatnot, we always talk about fail fast, right?
Yeah. I just wrote that down. I was going to ask you, what do you think about fail fast?
So it's all about fail fast. So you're making an assumption you're going to fail because I mean, when you're creating a new product, it's impossible that you can understand every single human you're going to impact with that product and if it's going to be positive or negative. There's going to be that negative impacts in some way or the other. You just can't, as an entrepreneur, even if you have a good team around you, it's impossible to predict that, right? So you know you're going to fail. How can you accelerate that failure so that you can get those learnings out of the way ASAP? So you cut your losses, learn from them, move fast, and be in that, what we call it, build measure, learn loop very fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the things that my audience loves is stories that connect the dot, right?
Yeah, totally.
So this topic is really big because tip 5 about accepting failure and pivoting and learning is big because most people don't know how to do it.
Totally.
Is there a story you can share of something where you're like, damn, and then how did you recover? How did you
For sure.
find whatever you needed to like, change the cup and look at things
sure.
differently or however you're.
For sure. I would say there was, during my entrepreneurship journey, there was a phase where pretty much everything I touched was going wrong.
As you're
right?
talking, I can feel my own heart level like beating because like we've all had that moment.
Totally. So it wasn't like this,
Yeah.
it was this. I'm like, what the heck am I doing here, man? And so like one thing after the other, I'm like, I'm a very positive guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, after first, I'm like, okay, I can take it. Second thing, third thing, fourth thing, it really tests
Yeah.
you. So I'm like, I'm a very positive person. What the heck is this going on,
Yeah.
right? And the reason why it was really hard for me to accept, I mean, sure, the positivity keeps me up and all of that stuff, but in a way that's a facade to actually what's happening
Yeah.
inside, right?
Yeah,
Inside
yeah.
you are still suffering every time you are losing.
Yeah,
You're still holding the grudge. You are still like it's still painful.
Yeah.
You just have a smiling
It's
face.
cuts.
Yeah, exactly. There are cuts,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, fine, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But technically, you're not. And the reason you're not is because you acknowledged each of those as failures.
Yeah.
And so there was that time where it was one after the other, and I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. I should have listened to my mom and just done a job.
Let me call Rogers.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, mom. Why did I
Hey,
do
is my
this?
seat still warm?
So I mean, eventually, it was sort of a spiritual journey for me, you can call it, where just acknowledging and saying that, hey, you know what, this is part of life.
Yeah.
If I'm supposed to fail, that's fine. I just need to have that belief in me that eventually I'll rise. It's nature of law. It's gonna come up. I mean, if I just have enough persistence, if I believe in my purpose, if I believe in my passion, if I believe I'm on the right path, and if I show persistence, then I'll pass. I mean,
Yeah.
or my belief is wrong, and then everything I stand on is wrong, right?
Yeah,
then
yeah.
screw it. Then how does it matter
Yeah,
anyways?
no, it's a great way. So we got 5 tips. I'm going to recap it. Number 1, find or figure out what your reason is before you get into it, which is very critical when shit just goes bad. Because if you don't have the right reason, you're going to be the first one to walk. There'll be another statistics on a failed entrepreneur, the number. I'm like, no. Okay, you just have to figure out your reason, then you're good.
Yep.
Number 2, who is the audience? Like, why do they care about you? Is the problem big enough? Even if it's not big enough, is it big enough for you?
Yep.
Right? Practice selling. I don't care whether you're a first timer or you've been doing this for many, many years. If you can't articulate your idea to another human being who'll write you a check,
Yep.
you have no business.
Yep.
Right? Number 4, it's about people. And Sonia said this too, and you've reiterated. I've been saying it my entire life. No matter what business you start,
Yep.
it's about the human on the other side.
Yep.
So get to know the human and practice on being nice to people. And number 5, expect failure and learn how to handle it. Learn how to grow from it. Learn how to get better.
Yep.
5 tips from the masterclass. Kundan ji.
All that I learned from him.
Kundan ji from the App Lab. So one quick question for you,
Yes.
because this is me just interested in knowing how your journey has been. 10 years ago, after you moved down from Rogers, you got into this notion of I'm going to be an entrepreneur. What would you say is the number one thing about yourself that you learned that surprised you?
Through the entire journey or at some point?
Entire the journey. Yeah. One thing you could be like, man, I didn't know I was capable of being depressed for that long and still come up smiling.
Wow. That's a good question.
And nobody else asked you that question, did they, in all your interviews? Because I know you.
Yeah, no one did. No one did. I mean, the first thing was I didn't know I could sell, to be very honest. I mean, I was a very introvert person. I was a techie. I wanted to be a software engineer, be in a cubicle just programming all my life, right? That was the journey I was setting for myself. So I didn't know I could sell. I could really talk to people and things like that, right? So that was the first thing that surprised me, that, oh, wow, I could do this. And that, in a way, changed my course of life, right? The rest of my university life was just figuring out how can I be an entrepreneur. And I did that during university as well. So that was the first thing I would say that surprised me about myself. To be very honest, I mean, yeah, actually, one more thing. I mean, I thought I was, and I mean, sometimes you give too much credit to yourself, and I think at some point you feel, hey, you know what, I can do anything, I can do everything, right? I can like whatever, give it to me and I'll do it. I'll solve everything, right? So so there's that ego that just makes you feel you can do everything, right? But every corner, every turn, you realize, no, I don't know this, I don't know this, I don't know this, right? So throughout the journey, there's always those aspects which you'll see,
right?
And it's a part of that, right? I mean, really acknowledging what your strengths are and understanding what your weaknesses are, so that you can find people who can do things you can't do.
Yeah.
So if you so it's So throughout the journey, I thought I could do everything. I'm a generalist. I know every single thing about everything. I'm perfectly cut to be an entrepreneur. But then you're like, no, there are 1 million things to learn, and I know only 20 of them. So I need other people to take care of the rest, kind of a thing. I'm good at leading. Let me do that.
I follow a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk. You know him.
Yeah, of course.
And he says a lot about like, forget trying to work on your weaknesses. Work on the shit that you're good at.
Totally.
And get everybody else to do the other shit. And first time I heard it, I'm like, it's totally opposite. People always say, work on the stuff that you're not bad at. Then I realized, the shit that I'm really good at, the world needs more of. The things that I'm not good at, I'll put my hand up and go, I'm not good at it. Let's get somebody else to do it. And then we move on. But this has been a fantastic session.
Same here.
My man Kundan from App Lab will have all the details underneath. Get in touch with him, buy him a cup of coffee, and pick his brain, because these are the people that you should meet and get to know and follow, as well as all the Zuckerbergs and all the guys, which is really cool. But there's real people making real impact, making real changes, creating real opportunities. That's what this masterclass is about. I'm your host, Sats.B. This is Kundan. We're out till the next one. Thank you for watching.